All right, welcome to my webcast. My name is Eric Bowers, and my artist name is The Golden Repair. And this is my webcast series where I do interviews, and I also sometimes do some music and different talks. And today I have Christopher Solomon with me.
Hello.
And hello, Christopher. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, great joining you.
Christopher has been cultivating a relationship with Salvia Divinorum for over a decade. Mm-hmm. You're down in the San Francisco area, right?
Yep, I live in the Haight-Ashbury area in San Francisco. So
right.
Summer of Love unfolded in the heydays.
And I'm just reading some of your bio here. You're incorporating the lessons you've learned directly from Salvia, as well as what you've learned as a somatic psychotherapist, or in your training, a student of somatic psychotherapy.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
So you're bringing those two things together, along with meditation practices, introspection. There's lots that you're doing here. I'm really keen to hear all about it.
Yeah.
What I'd love to start with is just a little bit of your background. Where did you grow up, and what was that like? What was life like for you growing up?
Sure. Well, first, it's really great to be here. Thank you. I was born in South Africa, in Johannesburg, South Africa. And I lived there for the first 14 years of my life.
Okay.
And then, and that was wonderful. I mean, I didn't really have anything else to compare it to because that's the only place I'd lived.
Right.
And then when I was 14, I moved to Dallas, Texas.
Wow.
And that was a huge difference. And so it was just a massive contrast going from South Africa to Texas. And, it's difficult to compare the two, same way that it's difficult really to compare Texas to any of the other states in America as well.
Right.
Yeah. But it was.
I'm guessing it was hard. Was it a hard move?
It was actually surprisingly well. I'm personally pretty adaptable.
Okay.
I can pretty much be in any situation and be okay with that.
Okay.
I enjoyed the move because I was looking forward moving to America. Because even when I was growing up and I was younger, I was thinking how cool to be able to live in America. And so I was excited about it. And I was just excited about the big cars and the fast food and which I never ate the fast food actually, but it was the image of it that was very alluring and very enticing. And so then I lived in Texas for about 10 years, and I went to the University of Texas at Dallas and studied psychology and finance, and when I graduated college, I got a job as a financial software consultant. So I used to be in a completely different field.
Okay.
But then I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a medicine man.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was about I think I was like 8 years old, and I don't know where I got the idea from.
Had you had an experience? Had you met a medicine man, or?
No.
Okay.
No. The only thing I can think of, and I actually haven't checked to see if this is actually a thing, but I believe there was a movie with Sean Connery called Medicine Man.
Okay.
And I think it was made in like the early 90s or something like that, I think. But I remember when I was a kid, I used to make little like plant potions. And so what I'd do is I made potions to like heal diseases. That's what I wanted to do. And my little child brain was thought, well, obviously plants and flowers can heal sickness.
Yeah.
And so I'd go around in my garden in South Africa, and I'd pick flowers and plants, and I'd grind them up in a mortar and pestle, and I'd put them in little bottles and mix them with oil. And it was just like playtime, fun time, potion making. Yeah.
Did any of that stay with you through your teenage years, or mostly as a child?
Mostly as a child.
Yeah.
It was funny actually when I was living in South Africa. I'd go like ride my bike with my friends every day, and big gardens and everything like that. And I noticed actually a lot of that exploratory mindset of mine kind of stopped when I moved to America.
Right.
Um, because here people don't have very big gardens. You might have a small little garden, but the houses are really closely packed to each other in the suburbs and stuff like that. Um, so, and even like little things, like school in America, all the classes, like you go to school and it's all inside one big building. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in America, school is all inside one big building. All the classrooms are in the same building, and so
Yeah.
you're pretty much inside the entire day.
Right.
And then during lunch break, you don't go out and play. You go to the cafeteria. So then you
Right.
go and sit down and you eat your food and so on and so forth. But in South Africa, even all the way through up through 12th grade, there's no cafeteria. So you're running around and playing outside for a good portion of your childhood. Um, so I'd actually never thought about what I'm saying. It's just the question you asked, whether I've that continued through my teenage years.
Yeah.
So it might have been just because the social structures were different here.
Right. And the environment was very different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when did you first get interested in plant medicine?
It was actually when I was in college. I had an experience with psilocybin mushrooms, and that just completely changed my entire perspective of reality. And I used to be, hardcore atheist, and the only thing that's valuable is what science can prove. And I was very like, I was a stern materialist in that way.
Right.
Um, and I didn't believe in anything metaphysical or anything spiritual or anything like that. But then I had this very profound mushroom experience, and it wasn't actually my first mushroom experience. It was my third mushroom experience. The first two were just fun, recreational. I was like, wow, look at things moving. This is really cool.
Right.
The visuals were just a unique novelty, and I liked the way it made me feel. But then this third mushroom trip, something different happened, and it was just a complete awakening. And
Was there a higher dose or a different setting than the first two?
um, same dose, maybe a little bit higher, but only like half a gram higher. I think it
Right.
was like between 2 and 3 grams, so it wasn't a very high dose. Um, there was just something different about it.
Okay.
Yeah, and
And it shifted your sense of what's beyond this material world.
yeah, it just it was very humbling. I'll
Yeah.
say that much. Because at first I thought I had everything figured out, and I was just like, well, everything that we can see, that's all there is. But then all of a sudden, I got shown this completely different world of not just visuals, but also emotions and thought insights and revelations. And I was just getting these ideas from seemingly out of nowhere. And so I think the biggest thing that shifted in my perspective from that point of view was that one, I got a sense that there was something bigger than our human mind, or there was something bigger outside of myself.
Right.
I was very autonomous and very independent, and so that was the one part where I thought, okay, well, yeah, there's more than what my eyes can perceive, and then there's more than ideas that can be taught to me from just classes and books. There's ideas that can come to you through either the plants or from meditation or from just thinking intuitively.
So did that set you on a path to explore further what you were being shown?
Um, Not that much. What it did was it happened in stages actually. It was this profound mushroom experience, and that changed a lot of things, but that didn't really set me on my path. Because then I carried on my path of working in the corporate world as a software consultant, and I did that for about 8 years, and it just really wasn't me.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't terrible, but after a while, doing something that is not what you really should be doing just becomes a little bit draining. And but what really piqued my interest in a lot of these things was, and also as far as salvia is concerned, when I was in high school, I'd smoked salvia a few times because,
Oh, really?
yeah, because you could buy it at just the local smoke shops, like the pipe shops,
Oh,
um,
in Dallas or in Johannesburg?
in Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was 14 when I moved to um,
Right.
and then it was my senior year of high school that some sitting in front of me in my physics class, actually, he turned around to me and he was like, "Hey, Chris, have you heard of this thing called salvia?" And I was like, "No, what's that?" He was like, "Man, it's crazy. Like, it's legal and you can just buy it from the smoke shops and you smoke it and you trip really hard for like 2 minutes." And I was like, wow, I was like, this sounds neat, because I just recently like been introduced to cannabis as well, and that was a whole new ball game. I was like, wow, this stuff's great. So my first couple of salvia experiences were just very bizarre, which is most people's first experience with salvia. You usually get this like little like jar of concentrated extract, and
Right.
they look like little flakes. And so the way you can either use salvia by smoking the plain leaf, or you can use it by smoking the concentrated extract.
Right.
And so what salvia extract is it's mainly they take like a bunch of dried plain salvia leaves, and they extract the psychoactive component out of it, which is salvinorin A, and then they take that and then they redistribute that over a smaller mass of leaves.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just the extract and the plain leaf have the exact same properties, but you just need much less material with the extract.
Okay. So
And
I've
mhm,
so I've heard a lot of different stories about the weirdness of the journey. I haven't tried it, but that you turn into a chair, or
mhm,
you become the floorboard. Or do you
yeah.
remember what your experience was those first couple of times?
The first couple of times I didn't really turn into an inanimate object. Later experiences I did.
Uh-huh.
But the first couple of ones I just felt these very interesting pulling and pushing forces moving on my body. I didn't have any visuals or anything like that. It was just, it felt like there was someone sitting next to me pushing on my body,
Okay.
to the point where my body actually moved because it felt like it was being pressed on. And that's all it was. It was, and there was some odd random images that would come to mind, and I don't really remember what those were. Um,
And is it literally just a couple of minutes?
yeah, if,
Okay.
if you smoke the concentrated extract, it's just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Mm,
So you tried it a couple times in your youth, and then you let it go?
yeah, I tried it once, and then I didn't do it for a few months, and then I tried it again, and then I didn't do it for a few months, and then I'd try it for a couple of days in a row, and either I'd just laugh hysterically, or have these experiences that didn't really make too much sense. Um, so I was kind of like on and off again with it for a few years.
Yeah.
Um, but everything changed dramatically when I meditated before I smoked it. And that just changed the entire experience. So, the first dozen times or so that I smoked it, I was kind of doing it without any respect,
Right.
and I wasn't doing it with any sort of intention. It was just, hey, let me smoke this because why not? Because it's here. And but I remember this one particular time I was sitting in my apartment, and I thought, well, and I don't even know why I got this thought, but it just came into my mind. It was like, hey, you should meditate before you do this. And it was a very short, simple, brief meditation that I did.
And how old are you now?
Now I was 21.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow.
and
And had you had some experience with meditation already?
I have. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I've been meditating since I was a little child.
Oh,
Actually,
wow.
I
Okay.
remember in bed at night, I'd like sit there and I'd light a candle and just stare at the candle for as long as I could. And
Okay.
um, But I wasn't doing any sort of like Buddhist text readings or anything like that. It was just focusing the mind.
Right.
And so what I did was I meditated beforehand, and it was a very simple, brief meditation. I just closed my eyes and I breathed in and out 10 times.
Right.
And then on the 10th time, I inhaled the salvia. This particular time, I used 20x extract. The extracts come in times extract. So there's 5x, 10x, 20x, 40x, 60x, all the way up to, I think, like 400x. And essentially what that means is how much concentrated extract is on the volume of leaf. So you'll need a lot less 40x leaf than, say, 20x leaf.
Okay.
But honestly, most people don't even need the extracts, actually. Plain salvia leaf works just fine.
Right.
Yeah. And I can
So
talk. Yeah, so what happened was I inhaled the salvia and I lit the bowl and I smoked it and I breathed in. And then as soon as I exhaled, what happened was from my peripheral vision, I got these parallel lines that kind of look like graph paper almost, coming in from the side of my vision and meeting in the middle of my vision. And between the lines, so if it's looking like this, between the lines, it was filled with like just luminous colors, yellow and greens and oranges. And I thought, wow, this is interesting because, I've done this a dozen times and I've never had any visuals.
All right. Okay.
So I was like, there's something different about this time. And I was sitting in my room, but even though I was sitting in my bedroom, the lines that were coming in from my peripheral vision started to form and take shape, and they actually turned into what looked like sand dunes.
Oh, wow.
And so I was sitting there in my room, but then also looking at these sand dunes. And over one sand dune, there was a sun rising, and over another sand dune, there was a sun setting. So there was a sun rising and a sun setting.
Okay.
I was like, wow, this is like I'm in a desert somewhere. And then I looked to my left, and to my left, I saw this female entity figure just standing there, probably about 10 feet away from me. And the funny thing is, so I saw this entity standing there, and I could tell it was female, and it was just radiating love. It was just absolute pure love, and it felt like if you were to take the essence of a loving, warm smile and put that into a being. And I saw it, and the funny thing is, then what I actually remember this. What I said out loud was, I said, "Oh, there you are." and there was this dialogue going back and forth between me and her, and she said to me, she said, "Yes, I've always been here, and I always am here." And but it's interesting with salvia because when you have dialogues with entities, and you don't meet entities every time, but when one does, it's not with language. It's with you just get the ideas in your mind, and it's complete. It's beyond language. It's like emotional telepathic communication. But so then I sat there for about a few minutes, and I was just in connection with this entity. And it was just me and her alone in the room. I hope it's okay that I'm anthropomorphizing her. It was just me and her alone in the room. But then I could tell in the rest of my apartment outside of me that there were like tons of other entities in the rest of my apartment. And they were like going through my cupboards and jumping on the sofas and stuff like that. So that, they were having a party out there.
Wow.
And then it just slowly faded away, like the sand dunes faded away, and she slowly faded away. And then I was back in my room. And I was like, oh my gosh, what the hell just happened? And I remember I called one of my best friends at the time, and I was just like, oh my God, I just met an entity. And he was like, what?
Wow.
Yeah.
So the thing that strikes me about your story is, what I've about salvia, but what I've heard is tried it once, never again, maybe twice. So, and it's usually because it was just too weird, and
right.
Out there, and I didn't.
It can be
Say
scary.
that again.
It can be scary
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
But you said you did it about a dozen times before this story you just told.
Right.
So you were having, obviously they weren't too weird for you, and I guess the question is, why were you keeping going with it?
What does that say about me? Maybe I'm just stubborn, but I think it was the one thing is there's nothing like the salvia effect. There's nothing that it can be compared to. And so I think maybe why I kept going back to it was because of the sheer uniqueness of it. But it's interesting as well because even if you have a very profound experience in salvia, you don't immediately want to go back and do it again. Even if you had the most nourishing, beautiful, healing experience, there's no part in you that has any sort of like physiological inclination or psychological need to do it again anytime soon. And there's actually I believe there's some neurochemical reasons for that because of the receptors that it activates in our brain. It affects the kappa opioid receptors in our brain, which essentially is the reverse receptors that alcohol and heroin and prescription painkillers and opioids attach to.
Okay.
So you've got your kappa opioid receptors and your mu opioid receptors are the ones that things like prescription painkillers agonize. So when you get your mu opioid receptors activated, what happens is everything feels super pleasurable at the time. You know, you take your morphine or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, I feel amazing. But then you come down and you have withdrawals and you have cravings and you get depressed and you become dependent and sobriety seems really dull and boring.
Mm-hmm.
Now, by comparison with salvia, you smoke salvia and you have not exactly a pleasurable experience. There is a way to make salvia pleasurable, which is how I use it with my clients, and I can talk more about that later. But essentially, when you get your kappa opioid receptors activated, it makes sobriety seem really cool, and it makes just being clean and healthy seem very, very wonderful and very appealing.
Wow.
And so I think because it has almost like a anti-addictive effect, it is a strong anti-addictive agent actually. So, and it's also a very potent antidepressant because it affects those same kappa opioid receptors. But I think just because it activates the part of our brain that makes us not want to do bad things to ourselves, even though salvia is not bad for you, it just takes away that part of you that has compulsive behavior.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you heard of any research of where it's being used to help people who are struggling with addictions?
Yeah. So, well, for one thing, they have done research on that where they've showed they did a lot of studies as they always do with rats, and they showed that with rats it stopped their cocaine dependence.
Okay.
Or what they would do is they'd have rats and they'd give the rats free access to cocaine, and the rats kept on going to the lever and pushing the lever, which gave them the cocaine. And then they'd give the rats very high doses of salvia. So I believe they'd extract the salvinorin A out of it and then intravenously give it to the rats. Because I don't think you can make a rat use a bong. And then after that, the rats they stopped their cocaine use.
Right.
I guess, most people actually don't even know where salvia comes from. So I should probably say that first as well.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, salvia, it's part of the Labiatae family, which is part of the mint family.
Okay.
Salvia means sage, and Divinorum, it's the sage of the seers or the diviner's sage. And it's originally from Oaxaca in Mexico in the Sierra Mazatec mountain ranges. And so it's just one of the many types of salvia. There's over 500 different types of salvia.
Wow.
If you regular sage that you use for cooking, that's a type of salvia.
Okay.
And sometimes actually I've been at the grocery store and I've looked at the package of sage and it said salvia on the front. And I was like, that's not my type of salvia. So
Mhm.
it is part of the sage or mint family, and it's a type of sage. And the shamans in Oaxaca use it traditionally. They use it by chewing the fresh leaves,
Right.
and they use it to cure alcoholism, and they use it for healing, and they use it to treat anxiety and depression.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And but there are lots of top-notch researchers right now. Johns Hopkins University is busy doing a study on salvia, which I was actually a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, but before we go there, uh, I just want to try to get a little bit more of this. You know, it's my experience too, actually, with mushrooms and ayahuasca.
Hmm.
That that sense of, you know, profound experiences, but not wanting to do it again soon. You know,
Yeah.
I really
Mm-hmm.
take a lot of time in between my journeys,
Right, right.
um, and it's I'm I'm wondering, do you know if it's similar, if psilocybin and ayahuasca, DMT, if are they similar in that sense of not having the addictive quality or being an anti-addictive type of medicine?
Um, well, they affect completely different receptors in the brain.
Oh, they do. Okay.
Yeah, totally, totally different. There's absolutely no crossover at all. So, psilocybin and DMT and ayahuasca, which is just DMT essentially, it's NN-DMT.
Yeah.
Um, those all affect your, I believe it's your 5-HT2A receptors in your brain.
Yeah.
And so while I believe they do have, and I know they have very profound healing effects, and people oftentimes get over their addiction from using, whether it be LSD or plant medicine. Um, it's neurochemically and physiologically, it doesn't work in the same way.
Okay.
So the end, the end outcome is the same, but they work differently.
And so you said you don't feel a sense of a pleasurable feeling when you're on salvia?
Well, what I've learned from my own using the plant is that if you slowly work yourself into the salvia space, then it's pleasurable.
Okay.
Then it feels very
Right.
relaxing and very
Right.
meditative and very healing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like if you do, because what people do is they load a big bowl of their concentrated extract and they smoke
Yeah.
the extract, and then before they know it, within 15 seconds time, they're in another place. They no longer
Hmm.
have a body, or their body's turned into something else,
Yeah.
and it's physiologically very jarring.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're like, whoa, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I thought I was a human, but next thing I know, I'm actually a piece of astroturf,
Yeah.
or I'm a little piece of rubber on the bottom of someone's shoe. But if you go slowly, so the way I use Salvia with my clients is, and for myself, is I give them small incremental smoked doses over the course of time. And that way you somatically prime the body.
Yeah.
So you first feel some tingles, but then once the tingles start to feel like a little bit like stretching or maybe some sort of unzipping, or you feel your body physically, oftentimes it's described as your body feels like it's being folded over like a blanket.
Okay.
Um, but if you just jump straight into that, it's uncomfortable. But if you slowly work yourself into that stage, then it's a lot more manageable.
Right.
Mm, mm.
I got to say, I really enjoyed your talk at the conference at
Oh.
UBC a few weeks ago.
Mhm.
And, you know, the two things that stood out to me were, you know, the real difference that it makes with set and setting.
Oh yeah,
And,
huge.
and I think your story highlighted that as much as any story I've heard in terms of salvia, no way, never again, to with the meditation, the respect, the
Mhm.
intention, you know, it became a beautiful healer for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then on top of that, so that was one part, the difference you had with bringing a meditative, intentional, you know, honoring space. But then you also developed this incremental. You had that really cool graph. It was like, okay, here's one option. You just go for it.
Right.
and there's another really slow option with chewing it.
Yeah.
And then you had this in between of slow, taking some, waiting. And what I really loved about it is what you're saying. It was an easing in to really appreciate the space. And there was also a sense of you can stop whenever you want.
Yeah. Right.
You can get to this state where it's just feels such clear mind all the way to the Salvia land. Is that right? Is that the term you used?
That's what I call it. Yeah.
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 So, yeah, is there more you can say about, the way you approach salvia in terms of a ceremony or with what intentions and things like that?
Yeah. There's, a lot that can be said for it. It depends on what you want to use salvia for as well.
Right.
So I use salvia for many things. I use it when I need any sort of guidance in life, or when there's a problem I'm trying to figure out.
Right.
I've noticed that pondering on questions that you're unable to really come to any sort of conclusion on, or let's say you're like waffling between two or three things. You're like, well, I could do this, and I could do this, and I could do this, and they all seem okay, but nothing's really calling me. I've noticed if you want to get to extreme clarity of thought, salvia can be very useful with that. So the way I do that is I always start by doing a short meditation before I smoke the salvia, and I make sure that the room is pretty dark. It doesn't have to be pitch black, but lights can become a little bit annoying. So you just essentially have like a darkish room, and then.
What about a blindfold? Would that work? Or?
Yeah, that's great. There's a blindfold I like called Mindfold.
I haven't.
Yeah, right. So that's nice because you can have your eyes open and still be in the dark. I will say though, if you're going to use the Mindfold and smoke a big dose of salvia, that can be very jarring because you can forget you've smoked salvia, and you can also forget that you are wearing a blindfold.
Okay.
And so before you know it, your body doesn't feel like your body anymore, and you can't see anything, but you don't know why you can't see anything because you forgot you're wearing a blindfold. So I had an experience like that, and that was a whole big thing.
All right.
But one thing that salvia is one of the many things that salvia is useful for when it comes to trying to come to some clarity on a decision.
Yeah.
Especially if they're emotionally charged things that you're trying to make your mind up about. Right. Salvia is very good at actually taking the emotion away from a situation.
Okay.
It takes you to a place of still emotionlessness. And with the emotion taken away from the situation, you just have the nuts and bolts, and you just have the facts.
Yeah.
And I've also found salvia to be very helpful at integrating difficult psychedelic trips with other substances.
Okay.
If you're having let's say you have a strong DMT experience or a strong ayahuasca experience, and it was profound, and you got lots of lessons, but you're still kind of shook up from it, and just having a hard time. Sometimes it can be difficult to integrate some challenging experiences. I found salvia to be very useful for integrating those experiences as well.
Right.
But back to your question of how I use it in different settings. I use, again, I meditate beforehand, and now every time I smoke salvia, I use that salvia pipe that I invented.
Yeah.
And so with that, it's a pipe with multiple bowls attached to it, a water pipe with multiple bowls on it. So then you can load each bowl with a little bit of salvia, and it's because of that pipe that you can slowly work your way into salvia space without having to worry about reloading bowls in between.
Yeah, brilliant. And let me just type that in. Where would someone find that if they wanted that?
Salviapipe.com.
Salvia.
SalviaPipe.com. Yeah. Yeah, I was very happy with how well that worked, actually. I mean, even
Yeah.
though, even though I invented and made it, I was like, whoa, this is actually really cool.
Yeah.
Because it can be challenging when you're turning into an energetic being of consciousness to load another bowl, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, um, but the main thing is treating salvia with respect and curiosity.
Hmm.
And because the thing is, when it feels like when you smoke salvia, you're experiencing salvia just as much as salvia is experiencing you.
Oh,
And so that's why, for example, the healthier you are, and I've noticed this consistently, that the healthier I am, the more enjoyable and the more fruitful my salvia experiences are.
okay.
But if I'm not unhealthy, if I'm not healthy, um, because if my body's not healthy, salvia doesn't like being inside an unhealthy body.
I get it.
It's
Wow.
like
Yeah.
going inside of a messy apartment versus going inside of a clean apartment.
Right.
Um,
Hence, and probably hence why the meditation's helpful too, right? You're
yeah,
clearer mind for it to enjoy.
right. Yeah, the meditation is helpful for a few reasons. One, it clears your mind, and two, it gets you to a baseline of stillness to where you can be more perceptive of the subtle effects that salvia has to offer.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
it's kind of like if you're all thinking about other things, or if you think about, a body of water that's really rocky and, there's waves crashing, if you drop a pebble in there, you're not going to see much difference. But if you
Right.
have a body of water that's completely still and you drop a pebble in there, even though it's the same pebble going in, the pebble will seemingly affect the still water a whole lot more.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's that with that sort of mindset that I apply meditation to salvia.
Lovely. And and when you do the incremental, how long is the journey then?
So you can kind of stay in there as long as you want.
Okay.
Um, so when I use the extract with the salvia pipe, I put really just like a few flakes of extract, not very much. Don't pack a big bowl, don't even pack a quarter of a bowl. Just do like sprinkle a few flakes of, I use 20x extract, sprinkle that in each one. And you'll light it, inhale, hold your breath for as long as possible, exhale. In the first couple of, like the first bowl, you feel a little bit of something. Essentially, you just feel like a stilling of the mind,
Hmm.
a deepening down and relaxing in your body. Kind of like you've just been meditating for a few hours, but it happens very quickly. And so that lasts about 5 minutes. And then you can smoke the next bowl, and that'll last like another 5 to 10 minutes. Each one lasts about 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
And then you can just stack them and keep on staggering them and just keep it going. But I've also noticed as well that each one lasts a little bit longer. So the first one might last like 5 minutes. The next one might last like 5 minutes and 20 seconds. And then, so each one gets a little bit progressively longer. But salvia metabolizes very quickly in the brain and in the body as well. Within about 30 minutes, it's completely gone from your system.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's completely metabolized by the liver within 30 minutes as well.
Okay.
Compared to like psilocybin mushrooms, it takes a while for psilocybin to be metabolized completely by the liver. So psilocybin is more taxing on the liver. But it's not taxing enough to where it's dangerous.
So are you saying you could keep going with these little doses of salvia, smoking the little doses for as long as you want?
I haven't tried it for as long as I want. I've tried it for about maybe like close on 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and but I've
When you
also,
lead a,
Mhm.
no, go ahead.
Well, I've also just recently learned that movement and stretching and yoga on low doses of salvia is absolutely incredible. It,
Okay.
salvia can be a very informative body worker. She actually shows you where, really like good concrete example that happened to me just last week actually. I've been rock climbing quite a lot, and my right shoulder's been really sore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been doing all sorts of shoulder stretches and stuff like that, and nothing was really fixing it. And so last week I was thinking, well, let me put salvia to the job. Um, and my thinking behind that was I was assuming I had some sort of like inflammation in my shoulder,
Right.
and salvia is a very potent anti-inflammatory agent as well.
Okay.
And that is because there's a lot of terpenes in salvia. There's a specific type of terpene. They're called neoclaridane tricyclic diterpenes. And so those specific terpenes are very, very good for inflammation. And there's been a lot of research on that as well. So I was like, okay, well, let me smoke salvia just to like get rid of this inflammation. And so I smoked the salvia, and in salvia, communicated with me that I couldn't just sit there and like let her do all the work. I actually needed to participate, because she was like, well, it's like both of us have to work at this together.
Right.
You can't expect me to do all the work. She can be a little bit cheeky sometimes. And it's interesting. She can be extremely stern. She's chewed me out a few times before. She can be cheeky. She can be very loving. It can be a lot of things.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, what she did is she had me like pick up my arm, and she made me stretch my arm out to the side like this. And what she told me was that the tightness in my shoulder was actually coming from tension that was in my wrist and my forearm.
Okay.
Which I wouldn't have figured out because I'd been doing all sorts of stretches. And so what she made me do is she made me stretch my arm out. Let's see if the camera can see it. She made me stretch my arm out like this and cock my hand like this and do it, and then just do wrist rotations like that,
Huh.
while moving my arm back and forth and up and down.
Huh.
And which I never would have thought to do. And
Yeah.
so I was doing this, and as I was doing that, I was just like, oh my God, this is actually connected to everything that's connected to the shoulder. So I did that for about 10 minutes, and then my shoulder was fine. So like, for example, it doesn't hurt for me to like lift my arm anymore. Whereas 10 minutes before that, it did hurt.
Yeah.
So.
And then what level of dose were you on for that?
Medium. So I would say like, I mean, I don't know like what the weight was that I smoked salvia, but it was, if you think about it, like 0 being nothing and 10 being the most high dose, I was probably at around level 5. Yeah.
And you set the intention at the start to get support for your shoulder, and then it sounds like you're asking for it during the journey, asking for support with it as well, in the way that it happens. And
right.
So it's a relational thing. There's some kind of communication or dialogue going on around it.
There is. Yeah.
Beyond words, as you said, but there is this collaboration of healing that's going on.
Yeah, definitely collaboration. She wants you to take part and responsibility for your own self and your own actions as well.
Is there any teaching that comes through? Sometimes with other medicines, there's a teaching about a belief system that's stuck, or anything like that.
Yeah. Sometimes big teachings come through, and then other times one just has a deeply relaxing meditation. One thing is, so that's another thing that they've done with their research, is they gave EEGs to people on salvia, and they looked at their brainwaves. And when you smoke salvia, it very quickly takes you to the theta brainwave state. And being in the theta brainwave state is very therapeutic and very healing in and of itself.
Right.
So even if you don't do anything, even if you don't set an intention, even if you don't have a question or anything like that, even if you don't do body work or anything like that, merely being in an extended theta brainwave session is just naturally healing.
Yeah. And what does it look like when you're working with a client one-on-one? What's your role in that?
So my role in that is I'm I think of it as a salvia guide, but essentially what I do is, I'll go to where my client is. I go to them, and I make sure that their place is looking nice, that they have a nice setting. And I'll set up either, a back jack for us to sit down on the ground, or some blankets on the ground, or they can be on their bed or sofa or wherever they're comfortable. And then I will slowly work them into salvia space. So I'll be giving them the small incremental doses over time.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's going, there's a few things that I do. One is, and this is where the somatic psychotherapy comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
I track their body language somatically, whether it's looking at what their body is telling me based on how they're placing their hands, or how their feet are crossed, or any sort of facial expressions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if it looks like there's a little bit of trepidation on their face, I'm not going to, at that moment, force them to go deeper. Because
Right.
sometimes people say, yes, I'm ready to go deeper, but, no always means no, and yes doesn't always mean yes as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's just one part of it, where I'm working with the client and I'm saying, like, but you said yes, but let's just wait one more minute,
Yeah.
or let's wait a few minutes, because I want them to be in charge of the situation.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you're working with these plants, really, it's between the person taking the plant and the plant itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people who do work with these plants take too much credit for themselves for the healing that the plants do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm there to make sure that the person is safe, because at higher doses, one can kind of get up and just start walking around without realizing it.
Right.
So I'm there to make sure they're safe. I'm there to reassure them if they get scared.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes one can feel as if one's going to be stuck in the salvia state forever, because there's so all sorts of funny things happen with time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm there to assure you, hey, you smoked salvia, you'll be okay. But I will say, with all my clients, no one's ever gotten to that point when I've taken them into salvia space slowly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm also there to discuss and integrate the experience while it happens.
Okay.
Because it can be a little bit difficult to remember everything one says or does while in salvia, because it can have a slight amnesiac effect. And so if they say something that sometimes all it can just be like one word, or it can be a few words, like, oh, I can just be myself. I had a client say that one time, and they didn't remember saying that. But it just came out of them, and they said, really? I can just be myself? And so that, Salvia was saying to this person, like, yeah, just be you.
Yeah.
That's all there is to be, so just be you.
Yeah.
But it came as a relief to this person, like, oh man, thank God I can just be myself, because, who knows who else I was trying to be.
Right.
So I'm there to maybe like remind them of things they said. And then also, because salvia can communicate sort of symbolically as well. It's almost like dream interpretation, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm just there to talk to them, make sure they're safe, help them gain some understanding out of it. Yeah.
I've had some sessions where I've had a somatic therapist guiding my psilocybin session, and have done some somatic process work in the midst of the journey, which I find really profound. Do you ever do any somatic process when you're?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, definitely. Even if it's, there was this one person that they felt like this tightness in their throat, and their throat actually wasn't closing up. Their throat itself wasn't tight, but there was an emotion associated with the tightness that was there.
Right.
And so by helping them track what's going on in the body, instead of tracking the story that they're telling themselves, that they're like, oh, well, I'm feeling this tightness over here, this must mean this.
Right.
And the thing is, you could make up any damn thing in the world for what this thing over here means.
Mm-hmm.
But and that's just like a slippery slope, because before you know it, you're making up all these things that might be true, but they also might not be true, but one can't
Yeah.
really know. So yeah, the somatic tracking is just like, okay, well, let's just like feel into this, and what, you know, what is it trying to communicate with you? Like, let's get away from a story. And I will say though that one thing that's useful about using salvia is, with salvia, because it takes the emotion away from things, and
Right.
because it quiets your mind at the same time as well, you're not as likely to go into story mode with salvia than you are with some other things.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
There's still a lot I want to cover. It's already 10 to 7. Are you okay if we go a little past the hour?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So can you tell us more about the story you told at the conference, your own, this amazing story of healing for the thing in your neck?
Yeah.
And can you start by saying where were you when this healing experience happened that you're about to tell us? Where in your salvia history were you? Was it still early on? Was it a little?
It was about a year after I had it was about a year after I had first started sort of meeting entities, if you will.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, one thing I will say though is, so after that I maybe use salvia like once a month or once every few months, and each time, I'd say like, oh, who am I going to meet today? And there was this one particular time that I smoked salvia, and I was taken to this waiting room, which felt like a doctor's waiting room, a doctor's office. And I could tell I was alone in the room, and there were a lot of doors all around me. And I could tell outside of the doors around me, there were a lot of patients being seen by doctors. That's what it felt like. And so I was sitting there, and I thought to myself, like, that's odd. Why am I alone? Usually I meet some other sort of sense of presence, or I sense some other presences here. But in this case, I could sense I was alone. And as soon as I thought that, I heard a deep booming voice in my head. And I didn't actually hear it, but it felt like I heard it. And it was a stern voice of what I could only describe it as a king. And I don't know how I knew it was a king, but I just knew it was a king. I even knew what his face looked like, even though I didn't see him. But he said, Christopher, you're not going to meet anyone for a while because you're not putting the lessons we teach you to use.
Oh.
Yeah. And yeah, he was stern. Like he wasn't mean, but he was. And so he said, don't come back for a while. And I was like, okay, noted.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was crazy. I'd never been reprimanded by a non-human entity before.
And did you make a link of, I can see that I've been getting lessons and I haven't been implementing them?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And it was like, well, even if we can tell that even if we do give you more lessons, you're not going to put them to use. So like, why should we bother?
Right.
Yeah. Because that's just a waste for us. So anyway, so then I took a long break. I took a break for like over a year. And then it was a year later that it was around December, close to Christmas time, and I got strep throat. And as I'd always done in the past, when I got strep throat, I'd go to the doctor's office and I'd get some antibiotics. And I took the course of antibiotics, and the strep sort of went away, but it didn't fully go away. And so then I went back to the doctor, and I went in another course of antibiotics. And so then they tested after that, and they said the strep was gone. But for me, what remained was a very large swollen lymph node in the side of my neck, in the right side of my neck over here. And my throat always hurt. It actually hurt to talk for more than a few minutes, and it hurt to swallow. But the doctors couldn't find anything wrong. I even went and had some blood work done, and I got tested for all these things, and they were like, no, you're healthy. You just have this thing in your neck. And I was like, yeah, but what's that thing in my neck? And they were like, I don't know. I was like, you can't say I'm healthy if my throat hurts all the time and I've got a lump right here, So I ended up actually going on 3 courses of antibiotics. And then there was also a feeling of like acid reflux almost, like at the bottom of my throat at all times. I mean, it hurt when I lay down, you know, there was like this acid reflux feeling. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe my diet's too acidic. Maybe I need to change things. So I cut out all red meat. I cut out all processed sugar. I stopped drinking coffee. I stopped drinking alcohol. I stopped smoking cannabis because I thought the smoke was maybe upsetting my throat. You know, I pretty much went like vegan with occasional white meat here and there, you know, and healthy whole grains. I started exercising a whole lot more and sleeping lots. And, you know, I really did everything I possibly could. And this damn thing just kept on staying there. And so by then it was what, December, January, like near the end of February. So for like 3 or 4 months, I'd like been battling this thing and nothing had helped. And the last advice that the doctors had for me is they said, well, you know, you have to have your tonsils removed because obviously you have a recurring infection and we're just going to say it's tonsillitis. So you need to get them taken out. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. But it kind of seemed like my only option. And then I remembered I had some salvia and it was just a random like idea. It just kind of came out of nowhere. I was like, it's been over a year since I've done salvia. Let me smoke some salvia. And so this was with a bowl of 20x extract, and it was a medium-sized bowl. So at that point, I hadn't even discovered like the stair-step method. I was still smoking largish bowls or medium-sized bowls. So I smoked this bowl of salvia, and in all my other experiences when I'd smoked salvia, there was this like pulling and pushing sensation that I described earlier on, or people describe it as salvia gravity, where it feels like there's these forces pulling on you. But what was different about this time is instead of it feeling like there were forces outside of me pushing on me, I felt all the forces were inside of me. And they started at the bottom of my feet and they slowly, actually not slowly, they very quickly worked their way from the bottom of my feet, up my calves, up my thighs, up my torso, up, 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 and it went straight to my neck right here where the swollen lymph node was. And when I felt all this energy congregating around the swollen lymph node, my arm automatically, my right hand automatically just started to pick itself up. And I thought, which is interesting as well, when your body just automatically does things without you thinking about it. My arm just like moved itself up. And as my arm was like moving up and towards this, I thought, oh, well, of course, let me just heal myself. And so what I did was, as if that's such a no-brainer, you know, like, why didn't I think about this sooner? And so what I did was I took my hand and I placed it on the swollen lymph node and I rubbed it like this in a circle, which I'd done ample times before because, you know, when you have like a sore tooth or a sore throat, you kind of jab at whatever it is, or if you have a sore fingernail, you jab at it, you know. So I've been jabbing at this thing incessantly for months. But this particular time when I put my finger on it and I pushed on it and I rubbed it, I felt it go click and it split in half. And which at the time didn't seem remarkable. I was just like, well, yeah, you have to make it smaller to get rid of it. And so then what I did is I rubbed it one more time and it split into 4, 8, 16. And literally with every single revolution that I made, it split in half one more time until it felt like little grains of sand. And it was still taking up the same amount of surface area as initially, but it was just like made up of lots of smaller little bits.
Right.
And so then when I rubbed it one more time until there was absolutely no feeling of anything there, when I could no longer feel anything, the energy that had congregated up my neck decongregated, if you will, and went and washed to my head and down to my feet. And then I kind of lay there with my eyes closed for about 10 minutes and I was just like continued meditating. And then I came out of my trance, if you want to call it that. And I swallowed and it didn't hurt. I was like, whoa, it doesn't hurt to swallow. And then like I felt and the lymph node was completely gone and it stayed gone and never come back.
Right.
And that
was there any teaching? Was there any teaching that was part of it, or it was purely just the physical healing?
Purely physical, purely physical. Yeah, there was no thought actually that was going through my head at the time. Mm-hmm. The only thought I remember thinking was, why didn't you do this earlier? Like, why didn't you heal yourself sooner?
Right.
And the thought wasn't, why didn't you smoke salvia sooner? the thought was, why didn't you heal yourself sooner? Which is just interesting. But so I kind of came to, and then I was just like, what the hell? What just happened? And so that's actually the main thing, more so than the entity visitations. That is what really got me started in my path with becoming a salvia guide and having salvia be my master plant.
Right.
Yeah. And it was only after then that I started doing research and finding out that I didn't even know, before this, I didn't even know that salvia was a shamanic plant.
Okay.
And so it was because of this healing experience that I started doing more reading on it. And then I learned that it was a plant used for healing, specifically for healing. Like that's why they use it. That's one of the main reasons they use it. So for me, it was really personally satisfying to have this experience because I wasn't going after a healing experience and then getting it. So it's not as if I was willing it on myself by going out and searching for it. It was just handed to me.
Wow. And is salvia, are you exclusive with salvia as your medicine, or do you use other plant medicines? Or?
I use other plant medicines as well. Yeah. And they all seem to play nicely together. Yeah. It was actually funny. I wanted to be a salvia guide quite a bit sooner than I actually became one. A couple of years ago, I thought I was all ready. You know, I'd had like all this experience, and I'd like developed these techniques and stuff like that. And so I thought I was ready. And what I did was I went to an ayahuasca ceremony, and it was a very, very, very profound and scary and strong and intense ayahuasca ceremony. It was amazing, completely life changing, but it was one of those challenging ones. But there was this one particular part of the ceremony that I met salvia on ayahuasca.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so that same salvia entity that I'd met all those years before, she showed up, but on ayahuasca. And I saw her there, and I was like, Salvia, what are you doing here? You know, like this isn't you. Like I'm on ayahuasca right now. And so what happened? There was Salvia over here and ayahuasca over here, and so I saw the ayahuasca entity and I saw the Salvia entity, and they were standing next to each other, and they kind of teamed up like sisters, and they both got very stern with me, and they said. And I don't know if this was Salvia speaking or ayahuasca speaking to me at this point, or maybe it was both of them together. But they said, hey, you think you're ready to start helping people with salvia, but you are so not ready. And just to show you how unready you are, we're going to show you how big and powerful we are. And they just kind of like a mountain rising up from the earth. Both of them just became absolutely immense. They became infinitely large. Wow. And they showed me how powerful they really were. And I was just like, holy crap. I was like, this is some real power right here. And they said, do you see now? Do you see how powerful we are? Do you understand that we created this reality? And I was like, yeah, I get it. And they were like, they said I wasn't ready to handle their power yet. And they said the reason why is not because I wouldn't know what I was doing. They said, you're not ready to help people with salvia because you are not strong enough in your own psyche yet. And if you start helping people with salvia now, you're going to do damage to your own psyche.
Okay.
Because they were like, you're working with real stuff here. This is real big energy. This isn't child's play, you know? And when you start doing this work, it's a real responsibility. Another thing they said to me in that journey as well is that I had to be sort of selective about who I do salvia with as well. So it was like, you can't just be going around giving salvia to anyone. You know, they have to be at their own mental stability baseline.
Yeah.
And I believe that with all psychedelics, actually. You know, there are some people that say everyone needs to do psychedelics. And I just don't that's not the case. Like, a lot of people benefit, and more people would benefit if they did psychedelics in a controlled therapeutic setting with people who knew what they were doing. But even if just not everyone should be doing these things.
Yeah.
And I really wish there was a more comprehensive way that we could tell who should and shouldn't be doing these things. There's checklists that they do for testing schizophrenia and psychosis and things like that. But yeah, Salvia was just like, yeah, you have to be careful with this because it's serious business. You have to be strong enough in yourself. You have to get more training in other fields. It's actually because of that I started getting my training in somatic psychotherapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was talking with a shaman about it afterwards, and I was like, hey, I met Salvia on ayahuasca, and he kind of chuckled and he said, I wondered when that crossover was going to happen. And so he's the one who recommended I learn like somatic psychotherapy. And then it was a few months later at another ayahuasca ceremony, I posed the same question. I was like, all right, so I'm going to study somatic psychotherapy. What else can I do to get ready to start helping people with salvia? That was my question for ayahuasca.
Yeah.
At one point I was sitting outside and I was looking at a tree, and it sounds kind of bizarre to say, but the leaves of the tree spoke to me. And the leaves just said one word initially. They said, teach. And I was like, whoa. Because like I was taken aback because it was just that they were that pointed and that they were that clear about it. And I was like, yeah. And they said, yes, that's the next thing you need to do in order to get ready for helping people with salvia, is you need to start teaching and educating people about her.
Mm.
And so then I just started doing those things as much as I could. And I finally got the stamp of approval to do the work that I'm doing.
Yeah. So what did your teaching look like? Giving talks and things? Or?
Yeah, either giving talks to groups of people or talking to people about it one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how long have you been guiding people now?
About a year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit over a year now.
Have you ever guided a session by Skype, and do you think it's possible? If you haven't?
I really wondered that. My only concern with that is if the person goes to one, they're the ones who are in control of loading their own dose, and they might like put like a fraction too much in.
Right.
And I have no control over whether, I don't know, like if they get up and start walking around, which can happen, I can say, stop, don't fall down the stairs, but like there's nothing I can actually do. And also it can kind of be tricky because with salvia, inanimate objects around you. So the same way that you can turn into an inanimate object on salvia, when you turn into an inanimate object on salvia, inanimate objects around you become animate.
Okay.
So everything starts to have life in it. Everything becomes alive. And it seems as if everything gains consciousness. Even, your shoelace. And so, I don't know, I'm just thinking it might be odd if I'm there talking to someone over Skype while they're on salvia, and all of a sudden the computer gains consciousness and the computer becomes alive. I don't know,
Yeah. Doesn't sound ideal.
No, it doesn't.
So back to other plant medicines. Is it an intuitive process, or do you have a sense of, I want to take ayahuasca for this purpose and I want to take psilocybin for this purpose? Or
that's a good question.
It's just interesting to me that you have developed such a relationship with salvia that
right.
You think
well,
to use other medicine.
The reason why is because salvia is a lot easier to take, and it's a lot shorter acting, and there's no hangover or no come down afterwards as well.
Yeah.
So I think one of the main reasons why I gravitated towards salvia versus working predominantly with other substances is because salvia is very pragmatic. She works very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
There's no bullshit. There's no gray area. She's just like, this is it. This is it. This is it. So I really appreciate the just
Efficiency.
yeah, exactly. I really appreciate the efficiency. Um, and I think you can get the same lessons from any medicines, you know. Um,
So that's just still leaving me with the question: why would you explore other medicines when you have this efficiency and this relationship? And
I think, well, with ayahuasca, for example, um, one can you're in the ayahuasca space for a little bit longer than in salvia space, because there's less like valleys and peaks. Salvia, it's like there's a congregation, a slow uprising of valleys and peaks. But with ayahuasca, it's this is a tricky question actually. It's a good question. I'm going to think more about this because there's they're just so different.
yeah,
They're just very, very different. But I wouldn't, if I were looking for physical healing, and like body healing, I would go to salvia before I would go to ayahuasca or mushrooms.
yeah,
But if I was looking to maybe deal with some complex emotional issue or a lot of like things from childhood or uh, healing any sort of like ancestral trauma that you might have as well,
yeah,
I would use ayahuasca and mushrooms for that.
yeah.
But it's not as if I have like a definitive checklist about like which medicine to use for what.
Mm-hmm.
But I know if for depression and physical healing, ayahuasca and addiction as well. Salvia really does the job very well.
Yeah, I just heard they're fast tracking. The FDA is fast tracking psilocybin for depression as well right now.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank God. Yeah.
So anything, I don't want to take too much more time, although I'm really enjoying all of it, but any that you want to say about the research you've been involved in, and what's the highlights for you there?
Yeah. There were quite a few highlights. One was just being able to go to Johns Hopkins and work with Roland Griffiths and like meet the man and talk to him about consciousness and the mind and everything.
And say more about who he is.
Oh, he's one of the head researchers at Johns Hopkins University. That I believe he was the pioneer, the one who started all the psilocybin studies with depression.
Right.
And so he's done a lot of work with psilocybin for terminally ill cancer patients and their end of life depression and treating that.
Yeah.
So he was there, and I'm actually still waiting for the results of the study to come out.
Okay.
Because they need to get I think like maybe 15 more participants. But essentially what they did in this is they gave me a high dose of pure vaporized salvinorin A. So they took the crystal form of salvia and they gave me the pure dose while I was in an fMRI and gave me a brain scan. And specifically, they're studying the claustrum, which is the part of the brain that Francis Crick, the discoverer of the double helix structure of DNA, he believed the claustrum is claustrum. He believes that's responsible for the creating our perception of consciousness.
Okay.
And the claustrum has a really high concentration of kappa opioid receptors.
Okay.
And so Johns Hopkins right now is just studying that in the brain and trying to see exactly how salvia affects the claustrum specifically, because they don't really know too much. What they have done though is they've given in mice, they gave them a lot of repeated doses of very, very high doses of salvia for a very long time, And then they did biopsies of the mice, and the mice were completely healthy and fine. So the first thing they did was test the safety of it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So they gave you it wasn't an incremental, it was a high dose.
Or boom, yeah. It was.
And then you're in an fMRI, and how was that? Did you become the fMRI?
I did.
Yeah.
I did actually. Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and then some. I became the fMRI, and then I became the researchers, and I became the hospital, and then I became the Earth, and then I became the universe, and then I came bigger than the universe. And essentially, I got taken to a space outside of space and time, and I was just an infinitely large, dark being of pure consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that? Were you okay with it? Were you freaking out? No, how was it?
You know, I was surprisingly okay with it, because it felt as if even though I was all of a sudden everything and nothing simultaneously, I felt as if I had a huge amount of autonomy in that space. And if I wanted to, I could have created another reality using my own consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah. So which made it seem less scary, because I was like, well, I'm not trapped here. I thought I was a human, but I'm not actually a human. I'm everything and nothing. But at least from here, I can work with, I can do things from here.
Was that the biggest dose you'd taken to date, or?
I've had another bigger dose with a big bowl of plain extract, but it was definitely one of the biggest doses I've taken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you get, and then Roland Griffiths was there as your support person, or?
Yeah. So he came and checked in with me, but then there was Fred Barrett, who's the fMRI, a really wonderful guy. It was him and Mary. I forget her last name. It's not Casemiro. Mary. She's the one who's actually guided most of the mushroom sessions at Johns Hopkins.
Okay.
So it was
I just lost your video. I don't know if that's on your end, but
let's see. Maybe. I noticed my battery was running low, so so now it's plugged in. Is the video still there, or is it still lost?
It's still lost. I can hear you though.
Okay.
Where can people find you if they're interested in just learning more about you?
Right. So my email address is on salviapipe.com.
Okay.
You can contact me there, or you can go to salviahealings.com. That's salviahealings.com. Yep.
Did you get to see the results of what your brain looked like on that?
Not yet. I got a video of the brain scan, so I can like scroll through my brain, but that's just like my regular brain.
Okay.
They have to do a lot of mathematics and whatnot to actually see what the changes in blood flow are during the fMRI. And unfortunately, I won't be able to see my brain individually. They're actually going to look for commonalities between all test subjects and see what the common thread was between all of them.
Okay.
But maybe if I like ask nicely or beg, they can tell me, because I'm really fascinated to what my brain did itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I imagine everyone's brain will kind of be stimulated in the same way from the salvia. So what happens to me, I'm sure would happen to the other people in the study.
And my last question, I think, is there a community of salvia guides? I've never heard of them, but
yeah, I'm the only one that I know of.
Yeah. That makes two of us.
Yeah, there's I have a friend he's a therapist, and he uses salvia sometimes with his clients, but only if they're and he just mentioned this to me one time, but he said he has one client that will sometimes get suicidal. And when his client gets suicidal, he will have her smoke salvia.
Okay.
And and he says it completely arrests the depression in her tracks,
Mm.
in its
Wow.
tracks, and it completely like gets rid of her suicidal tendencies and her suicidal thoughts for the time being. So, but he's not actually guiding people purely on salvia sessions. I think he's just doing like, you know, regular somatic therapy with her.
Okay.
But when he's like, oh, you know, this is dire, then he'll recommend salvia.
Hmm.
And you know, you know, one other person in the Bay Area who does some salvia work, but he doesn't do like one-on-one guided sessions. He has some plants, so like, but that's more just like a group of friends getting together and people in the community and chewing salvia together, but it's not like guided therapy or anything like that.
Well, hopefully more. It sounds like it would be lovely if there was a whole community of them all over the place, because it
Right.
sounds such powerful healing work.
Yeah, that definitely is.
Anything else, Christopher, you want to say to feel complete with this interview for yourself?
Um, I guess, I mean, the main thing that I want to reiterate for people is, you know, I said it a few times, but the main thing I want to say is don't smoke a very large bowl of salvia extract by yourself, or maybe even with someone. If you do salvia, make sure you have a mature sitter there, someone who can make sure you're okay and not speak to you and not ask you questions while it's going on and not poke you and make fun of you and giggle and stuff like that. Someone who takes it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, don't just smoke a large bowl of salvia extract if you've never done it before. Just do small incremental doses over time. And it's a really powerful plant with amazing healing properties that needs to be treated with respect.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, there's a lot more that could be said, but I think that's my main takeaway that I want people to know.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed hearing your stories, your journeys, the things you've learned, and I'm glad you're out there doing that work.
Thank you. It definitely feels like the right thing to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You take good care.
I will. And thank you so much for setting this up for me. I've had a really good time talking to you.
You're welcome.
And we will continue to be in touch.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye for now.